That's me.
I'm on in.
They are a coming.
People still coming in. We have to put some extra chairs in the back of the room, make room for everybody.
They can just squeeze in.
Yeah,
All right.
They can play musical chairs and,
Yeah.
it'll be an
Standing room,
added feature.
standing room only.
Indeed.
Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and get the recording set up.
Please. Say when, Alyssa. Welcome to our resourceful agents and investors nationwide. Today is Thursday, March 21st, 2024. And this is All the Leads Mastermind podcast number 472. Before I kick it to Tim, welcome back, Bruce, after a 3-week absence. Good to
Thank
have
you.
you back.
It's good to be
Tim?
back.
It's all
Absolutely.
yours, Tim.
Absolutely. And we'll maybe reserve a little bit of time at the end and you can regale us with your tales of enjoying the street life in Thailand.
All right.
I saw the pictures that you and your lovely wife have posted about it, and obviously we chatted a couple times while you're there. It sounded like you had an awesome time, bud.
It was pretty amazing. I will not start dropping all my stories yet. We'll see what kind of time there is left, but I brought a few back.
Well, that's great. I know that was always on you told me 2 years ago that was on your bucket list. It was awesome to see you finally get over there and get that done. Hey, so thanks for I mean, obviously we've got a big crowd today and we sort of anticipated that would be the case. And we're not here to tell you we've got all the answers about anything, but we certainly do want to have two things happen today. We certainly have some opinions about what's going on with the NAR uh, issues that are affecting us all and affecting our industry. And I think one of the first things I'll point out is that, we're living in a world where the noise factor is going to be stunningly high. And you can certainly see that every business publication in the world, every news agency in the world, everybody has their op-ed piece out there. Major newspapers have it. Everyone's talking about, oh, what's going to happen? And, most of them are the sky is falling and what's going to happen. And there's a lot of truth to that, because if you think that change is not going to happen as a result of this, you'd be sadly mistaken. And I think we'll all agree that that's probably a true statement. We first started talking about this a while ago when this sort of first came along, and we talked about it on an earlier podcast, and it was one where we got a lot of activity and a lot of conversation. And at that point, I think, the prevailing sentiment was, well, let's wait and see what's going to happen. And maybe it will, maybe it won't, have a big effect on us. And I don't think any of us necessarily would have predicted the way that it shook out in the fashion that it did. And of course, that's primarily because none of us was on the inside of that legal action and saw what was going on with that. So I think the reality is that it has had an effect, and it's going to have a measurable effect going forward. So what we'd like to do today is talk a little bit. We've got some really smart people on here, and I'm not simply referring to the people with the blue behind them there at all. I'm talking about you guys as well. We have lots of opinions and we're going to talk about them, but we definitely want to hear from you as well. One of the things in particular I'm interested in hearing about is what your brokers are saying to you as agents, what your franchise holders are saying to you as agents within the franchise, and all of that, and also your opinion about how it affects you. I think those of you who have spent time and energy and have a substantial part of your real estate business acting as a buyer's agent and working with buyers, you're going to be affected by this pretty dramatically. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Having said that, Bruce, since you're just back, I'm going to start with a question for you.
Okay.
You know, I know that you certainly worked both sides of this equation, but if you put your buyer's agent hat on right now, what are the things that you'd be most concerned about as a buyer's agent, other than the fact that, you know, the potential is there for you to lose a bunch of the money that you made? What are your issues? What do you see as the biggest challenges that they're facing?
So the biggest fear and the biggest challenge is I am going to have a hard time now. And this, I was never a fan of this to begin with, guys, but I'm going to now have a hard time talking to a buyer and saying, hey, work with me. You don't have to pay my fee. The seller will. I've never been a proponent of that, even when missions were publicly advertised through the MLS. But a lot of buyers agents used that to get their business. A lot of buyers agents used that to get their business, and it really made it where they didn't have to compete. So if you are not a competitive, experienced, or credible buyer's agent, I think that you're going to have a little bit of a challenge competing because this is going to commoditize the buyer agents that are out there, and mean that there's going to be a lot more competition going after that buyer business, and you're going to have buyer agents that are going out there and saying, work with me 1%, work with me $1,000, work with me 2%. You're going to have a lot of price disparity for a little while this gets figured out. I think that's probably the biggest challenge.
Okay. And do you see other, at least potentially other players entering the industry to potentially fill the void? And specifically, I'm referring to attorneys. Do you see attorneys getting more involved?
I could see attorneys getting involved potentially if this move drives more buyers to listing agents. So it's yet to be seen, but I could see this shift in this settlement sending buyers at a higher percentage to work directly to buy a house directly through the listing agents. And in that case, many buyers are going to want some sort of representation, and they might go to the attorneys.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that we watch a lot of television, and you know that the personal injury accident attorneys that are out there are, you know, capitalizing on fear and capitalizing on a lot of things to spend millions of dollars in television advertising to advertise getting big settlements. I can also see a new group of people coming out there and advertising for people who will capitalize on the fear that a seller might have that, you know, if you're going to sell your house and get it done, and that's great. But, you know, the pitfalls of not having a good contract and not having the things necessary to get it done, you may sell it and, you know, you got a big problem. More as on the other side of it, you know, you might buy a lemon, and if you're a buyer side, you might look at that as well. So you got to look at all that sort of stuff. I mean, on the buyer side, I mean, seller. I think protecting them legally is one of the things they'll capitalize on, because that's what keeps a lot of people working with, you know, the people that they work with today. And I'm seeing that coming. I think that's something that we'll see happen in the market. Ken, what's your thought on it from the buyer standpoint, buyer's agent standpoint?
Well, they're just going to have to get better at presenting their skills, their value, sitting down with people. I mean, that was always the barrier to entry to becoming a listing agent. Oh, you're not experienced, so basically just jump in the car with buyers, and buyers are fairly readily available to go with any agent who's going to open the door for them. Now they're going to have to sharpen their skills up front. They're going to have to practice their presentations, understand, you know, what their value is, and sit down with people initially. I think it's going to be required for an agent to have a buyer's representation agreement So yeah, I mean, it's just going to have to sharpen their skills
Yep.
and prepared to sit down and get something signed.
And we're gonna talk a little bit about what you can do to do that. I think that's important for us to talk about today, and that's kind of what I'm hoping comes out of this is that we're gonna have a lot of wonderful suggestions about things that you can do as a buyer's agent to differentiate yourself in the market, and we're gonna try to put something together for you document wise that helps that process along a little bit as a result of this call. So, we'll keep track of what everybody says and kind of try to distill it down into something that kind of makes sense for all of us. Jim, I know you've been at this a really, really long time, and I think your opinion is real valid here. You and I have been through the ups and downs of the industry. You certainly more so than I, but uh, do you see this being as earthquake-like as the late 2000s were?
I'm going to say yes and no. My initial response a month or two ago was it's not going to make a huge difference, and I still believe initially that's probably going to be the case. And I'll tell you why, because I think listing agents are listing agents because they don't want to show property. So like in Florida now in my market, you cannot put any buyer compensation in there. But I have a feeling sellers are going to find listing agents are going to find a subtle way to say, seller agrees to fully cooperate with buyer's agents, give me a call. And, we'll do this. So initially, I think the indication for listing agents will be to still want the buyer's agents working for them. The buyer's agent, in my opinion, and believe me, there are professional buyer's agents out there, but a lot of times the reason a buyer's agent is a buyer's agent, they're relatively new and or inexperienced, and maybe they're not real good at getting agreements signed. So they're going to have to, I think some of them were probably going to drop out of the business. There's going to be less of them. In our market, you have to have an agreement signed before the first property can be shown. Then you have to call the listing agent and say, what are you willing to pay me? If the listing agent says nothing, you're not allowed to exclude showing that property, which is kind of interesting. So if you are going to work buyers, you've got to have something in writing. And again, there's so many ways of getting around this. My wife did 2,000 short sales where the lender wouldn't allow her to be paid. But she said to the buyer, I'll get your closing costs paid and you can pay me out of what I save you. I mean, there's all, so what I'm saying on both ends of it, there's going to be ways to get around it for sure. As far as the attorneys for the most part are not good at marketing. They're not even allowed to market their services, in a lot of cases. So I think smart listing agents will find a way to market. There will be buyers that will be turned off by having to sign anything because they've never had to before. So there will be, and if they don't have a good buyer's agent that can sell them on signing something, there are going to be more buyers going to Zillow, calling on signs, and going directly to sellers. And if I was a listing agent, I was saying to Tim right now, when I was an agent, the last thing I wanted to do was an open house because you get a lot of nosy, unqualified buyers. If I were a listing agent now, I might change that opinion because I think a smart listing agent may hire somebody to do open houses for them because the buyers are going to want to show up and look at the property directly more than they used to. It might only be 10% more, but I think it's going to be pretty significant. So, and I think if you are a buyer's agent and you're getting an agreement signed, you may have to give options. You may have to say, okay, here, you can verbally say to them, majority of the time, I'm going to be able to get the seller to pay your commission, or I'm going to try. If I can't, we'll put in our offer that the seller will pay your closing costs. You can pay me out of that. If that doesn't work, worst case, you're going to owe me $2,000, or you're going to owe me some fee for all the time and effort I put into it. Or you can just take your chances and not put anything in the agreement. But even in that circumstance, you probably need a couple options that you can give the buyer. Is that now I'm creating a buyer agency agreement, and if you buy from anybody, this applies? Or is it just if you buy a house from me, this applies? Again, it's going to depend on the sales goal of the agent. Some agents will be able to sell them on working only with them. Some might want to give the buyer some flexibility. And Tim and I, we talked about what you could do on the seller's end to market yourself better. On the buyer's end, it's going to become really important. Tim and I talked about this. One of the things I'm going to do for you, instead of there's 87 properties in your price range right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter that down to the 3 or 4 or 5 best. I'm not going to make you go look at dozens and dozens of properties. That's one of the things I'm going to do. I'm going to set you up with a top-notch mortgage broker or two that'll take care of your financing. We talked about I'm going to try to get your closing costs paid. If you can sit down with the buyer and you're good at sales, I believe you'll be able to sell them on signing that agreement.
Well, Tim, I think also you're bringing up an interesting point. Most of the time, the that side of the equation is one that simply gets thrown into, we're going to do great marketing for you. And, when the listing agent does it and, you've got both sides of the equation in that percentage that was previously charged, those services and those things that you're talking about are never delineated, never have been. So most of the time, that person that is looking for it, they don't know what's being done for them. They don't understand all those on the seller side or the buyer side. In a lot of cases, I mean, I've bought and sold a lot of property, and I never got a full menu of here's all the wonderful, wonderful things we're going to be doing for you. It's a lot of it is I'm going to get it on MLS.
Sure.
And that's been kind of the key to all of this, is that without me, period, you're not going to get the property on MLS, and that's the only way things get sold. And of course, in this day, the increasing pressure, I think MLS is one of the things that also may end up having problems that, long term, that's been the purview of the local board. It's the way they've kind of held on to control of all of it. And at this point, I would say that's in serious jeopardy, because electronic MLSs and competitors in that market, I'll also tell you, I think they're going to come out of the woodwork. I think, and there'll be some dominant players, and I think there are going to be a lot more places that people are going to see properties available, and every listing is going to have to get pushed up to all of them. You're going to have to make sure that it's being shown appropriately everywhere, not just in an MLS. And this fee for services model got to be clear as to what the value is. Scott, I saw you had your hand up and you took it down. I'm going to ask you to unmute, and I did that now. If you have anything that you'd like to offer, I'd like to hear from you. What were you going to say?
Just a question. You'd mentioned that agents need to have signed brokerage agreements before showing their first house. How are the brokers recommending to you guys to handle open houses when a buyer comes into the house? Are we required to have some sort of brokerage agreement signed by a buyer before they tour an open house?
Well, required, certainly if it's an open house, I don't think there's any requirement in terms of doing that. I think the real question becomes, how does that happen? And Jim, I think you were kind of commenting on that about, listing agents typically don't do the open house. That's going to somebody else and all of that sort of stuff. What do you think about what Scott was asking?
My impression is you have to have that signed if there's any agency relationship. And just because you sign it, show up in an open house and look at the house with another realtor or the seller, the agent isn't representing you. So I don't think you're going to have to. You certainly want to register their name and information. But in my impression is, I don't think you'd have to have maybe you'll have to have a non-representation. Who knows? Depending on how strict your broker is, let them know, hey, I work for the seller, but I'll be glad to show you the house. But my impression is that I don't think you'll need a written agreement just to show somebody off the street, because you're representing the seller, and as a courtesy, you're showing him the house. If somebody disagrees with that, say so, please.
No, I think you're right. I think the challenge there is that, you just got to be more, certainly from that standpoint, you're going to have to be more aggressive with making sure that you're getting all the information down that you can get. And if somebody comes to an open house, that's not just a casual lead and not just something you're going to mess with. It's something that becomes critical to getting it done, because if you don't have advocates that are out there that are bringing people through and they're just coming through casually on their own, you may have other issues at play in terms of doing that for sure.
You probably want to make sure that the person that's walking into your open house already doesn't have an agreement with a buyer's agent. That's going to probably be more important to ask than ever. have you already signed with a buyer or a listing agent, or have you signed with anybody? You know, make sure they're not represented.
Good point. Yep.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's an extremely good point. Carmen, I know that you're on here. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to unmute for a second. You commented on something in regard to the fact that you've already heard from a CPA. Tell us what you heard.
The CPA is a conservator for a man who's got dementia, and I asked her what they wanted to pay the buyer's agent as a co-op, and her reply was, "Well, you can't charge 6% anymore." And I'm like, that's not my question. My question is, we charge X amount. How much do you want to pay the co-op? And she's not getting it. And so there's, because of all the misinformation out there and media hype, we have to find a way to really hone in to educate both the sellers and the buyers on this process, because they don't understand. The CPA, she does probably 5 or 6 conservatorships a year, and she doesn't understand it.
Right.
So this is where I would say, hey, you know, Carmen, I have no idea what your fee is to list and sell a house. Let's just pretend it's 3%. I would say my fee to market and sell and manage the transaction of this property is 3%. Starting in July, so not today, but starting in July, we're no longer going to be allowed to advertise a cooperating commission through the MLS. It does not mean, Mrs. Conservator, it doesn't mean that we can't offer a commission for a buyer's agent to bring their buyer. Would you like to offer one, or should we make the buyer pay their own agent?
And I think you have to talk, Bruce, don't you, about that? Don't you have to, if you're doing that, clearly draw out, you know, the human nature aspect of that, which is that, you know, if you're not going to do that, and you're not going to pay anyone to do that, how many people are going to look at your property or look at other properties in a more preferential way where they can make money offering those properties?
I think that's the whole point of the settlement, though, is we're no longer offering that through the MLS. So if a buyer's agent wants to figure out if there's cooperation, they're going to need to they're going to need to make a call or an email most of the time, or we're going to have to put in private remarks that, hey, seller's willing to pay 3% to cover buyers' closing costs, not commission, but closing costs. How those closing costs get used is up to the buyer and the buyer's agent.
Right.
Okay.
The other is social media, I think, is probably going to become more important. If you're not able to put that co-op on the MLS, then, you know, right now a lot of agents they don't do social media. They just list their house and that's enough.
Yeah.
But now if you're going to offer that co-op, you're probably going to have to be on Instagram and Facebook and, you know, all various other sources.
Yeah, and third-party sites are going to become really important. Offers should be submitted through such and such a third-party site. Well, guess what? There's nothing in the ruling and the settlement that says that cooperating commission can't be offered through a third-party site, just not through a NAR-controlled MLS system anymore.
Right.
All right. So we could drive traffic and offers off-site. We could offer 0% cooperating commission. So back to Carmen's question, you could just simply explain to the conservator that we're not going to be offering a buyer agent compensation through the MLS. Would you still like to offer buyer agent compensation and get interest not through the MLS, or would you like it to be 0%? In which case, just know that the buyer is probably going to put that buyer agent commission on top of the price, and it will come off of the HUD or the Alta as a seller cost. We're just not going to be able to advertise that commission through the MLS. Doesn't mean that we can't pay it. Doesn't mean we're not going to end up paying it. It just means we can't advertise it in the MLS.
That's a very good point. And I think specifically, I think you've got to have your act together when you're talking to people. And that's really what we're trying to get through here is that we can find a way to help you better craft your message to the people that you're dealing with and have a very cogent, solid response, because you can bank on the fact that you're going to hear about this from a lot of people that you're talking to. And I've talked to agents in the last 2 days who said already in their potential conversations with customers, they're hearing the exact thing. Well, what are you going to do about my commissions now? And it's very clear about that. They're not waiting until July. They're asking or June, July, they're asking the questions right now, and people are being responsive right now. And the opportunity, I think, to differentiate yourself now is there. So let's talk about what it is that I do. Let's talk about the things that we are going to do. And also, critical, Bruce, exactly what you said, the human nature side of this. Are you going to offer this, or are you going to trust it to the wolves that says, if you don't, you're going to hope that somebody does, actively show your property. And if I've got an opportunity to make, $10,000 here and an unsure footing on your property, where am I going to take my customer?
Mhm.
Well, obviously, I'm not going to bring them to you.
Right. Well, I think the whole real estate agent or the way we buy houses, it's all been financialized. So most buyers, they cannot afford generally their closing costs. So they're more than likely not going to be able to afford to pay their agents. So at the end of the day, if sellers have equity, I mean, like Bruce said, like you just said, we need to incentivize people to show those houses. So at the end of the day, like, would you work for free, Mr. Seller? If we want to have a bigger portion of the market, we are probably still going to have to offer a buyer's agent co-op in some fashion.
Let me pose something just real quickly. So I assume that, like I said, I assume on July 16th that most agents are still going to encourage your seller to pay a commission, and most sellers probably will. It's going to be a gradual process. But what if the agent says no? Is there any reason the buyer still couldn't put that in their contract? That I know you didn't want to pay me a commission, but here I'm making you a full price offer contingent on paying my agent.
No.
You can't
Nope.
do that?
Against the code of ethics, we can't use the contract to negotiate commissions.
Okay,
We can
that's
use
good to
the
know.
contract to negotiate closing costs.
So it would
Now,
have
if
to
you're
be closing costs. Okay,
if you're
got it.
not a realtor, yes, you can do that. If you're a real
Okay.
estate licensee, but if you're a realtor, you can't do that. But you can negotiate the seller net, and you can put the buyer can then say, hey, I want to raise the seller net by 2%, 2.5%, 3% if you'll pay my agent. Okay, so it might mean that we negotiate a seller net first and then put a buyer agent commission on top.
So if the seller agreed to sell for 100,000, you could come back and say, hey, if I made it 103, would you pay me a commission? Is that
you say, if I made it 103, would you pay my agent a commission?
My agent a commission? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
You just can't hold it hostage of not doing the deal otherwise. Got it.
Yep.
Really, I'm always thinking of stuff from the listing side, because I don't really show any buyers any properties, because again, these leads are so fantastic. So like get your leads. But I would say, yeah, the opportunity to double in transactions is going to go up,
exponentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you're sitting down with your seller and you're discussing a buyer's co-op, really enforce that conversation. And hey, if I bring a buyer myself, I would like 1% or 1.5% or 2% or whatever you're going to ask for. But I think it's really a huge opportunity for listing agents that are already successful. I mean, as we said, some buyers agents are just gonna fall out. That's simply what's going to happen. So, see this as an advantage to you if you are a listing agent.
We really haven't gotten into the opportunity yet. We're going to get there in a minute. The opportunity here, just teaser, the opportunity with this proposed settlement. And I did see a comment a second ago that said it is a proposed settlement. The opportunity with this is enormous. If you are a listing agent or if you're an investor, okay, the open door here for you to gain market share is just huge. If you work with buyers and you know how to present your value and you know how to structure deals, The opportunity is ridiculous. Some people are going to start driving buyer agent prices to the bottom. Okay, there are going to be buyers agents out there that go, "Hey, I'll help you find your house for $1,000." But all of a sudden, we're not chained to what's being offered through MLS compensation anymore. If you work with buyers, you are no longer chained to what the listing agent says you're worth. If the listing agent today is in the MLS and they say that you're worth 1.5%, you're kind of worth 1.5% because they've already negotiated your fee. Well, guess what? Now I've got an opportunity to negotiate my fee with my client, the buyer. And if I'm good at negotiating that and good at showing my value, I'm going to get more than what the listing agent formerly would have told me I can make.
You
Okay.
bet.
So the opportunity here is enormous. And on the listing side, it's enormous. And there are going to be some ways to creatively present value to sellers where you make more money and you work the entire side of the transaction. I'm not necessarily endorsing and promoting dual agency here, but there are going to be a lot of you on here who work both sides of the transaction where maybe you only represent the seller, but you'll work both sides of the transaction. And if you have properly positioned yourself right, you'll get both sides of a commission as well. So I don't want anyone here to be worried. I know there's a lot of fear right now, and if you adapt, you'll be better. You'll come out better because of this settlement. If you adapt,
We want to see you all continuing to be here and do this, and that's kind of the point. And we're going to talk very specifically about how this applies to, the transitional real estate market, which is why we're here. When this first came down, my first response to this was, wow, this is a great position for us to be in, particularly at this point, because, we represent a great opportunity for listing opportunities that aren't there on more normal, farming, circle prospecting, all the things that are out there right now. We know that property is going to change hands. So listings become more and more critical now. The other side of this is we're going to try to have to help also find those buyers and find the people that you can work with and profitably negotiate with to get this done. And we intend to help you get that done as well. We're going to take a couple more questions and people that have their hand up. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about how this applies kind of specifically to what we're here for, which is to talk about how it applies in probate and divorce and some of the other things that we're focused on. Eve, you had your hand up. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so my name's Eve Alexandra, and I have been an exclusive buyer broker for 33 years. And I'm kind of surprised how a lot of you guys are in the dark ages about what really can go on in a contract with a buyer, and or what you should do if a buyer walks into your open house. If your seller is your client, you do nothing. You show them the house and hope they bring their agent to buy it.
Yep.
But first of all, the code of ethics does not forbid anyone to include the commission in the offer. The code of ethics says that in a contract, you can't ask the listing agent to reduce their fee. That's a violation. But you certainly can put in there, on behalf of the buyer, the seller is to pay X amount of dollars to the buyer broker for their professional service fee. Now, I started in 1992 when they hated buyer agents. We were not allowed to show property. We were spit on. We had rocks thrown to our office. And for 5 years, we did nothing but make money from including our commission in the offer. Now, what I have learned is that, and just a side note here, I had the largest buyer brokerage office in the state of Florida for 10 years, and then I sold it. And what I learned was that I didn't have a single seller ever complain about paying me a commission. It was only the listing agents that had a problem with it. And one of the things why it was so easy for us, because we didn't play both sides of the fence. We represented the buyer and we didn't try to double dip it and make double commission. And an intelligent buyer that understands the difference will always pick somebody who isn't trying to double dip the deal. It's only the newbies or the uneducated buyers that will go to Zillow or try to go to the listing agent because they don't understand that they're actually, it's going to end up costing them more. So everybody, and exclusive buyer agents, another thing is that they're not the green agents, not the exclusive buyer agents. I don't know anybody that has been in business less than 10 years. They're the agents that always get paid out of a contract, and they always have a contract. I've had a contract with every buyer for 33 years. And have I ever had a buyer that didn't want to sign one? No. You narrow it down to maybe a week or 10 days, or just shorten it where it's just not, or maybe even a one-time thing. They come to town and they say, well, gee, I don't even know if I like you. You're right, you don't. So let's sign it after you get done. You know, after you work with them for a day and they like you, then you can do an agreement. But what I'm hearing out there is that these buyer, and I call them fake buyer's agents, sorry. They're the buyer's agent. They call themselves a buyer's agent, but they never really represent the buyer. They just represent the transaction.
Yep.
Especially in Florida, they're all transaction brokers. They represent a transaction, and their job is to close the deal and get paid. But a real buyer agent really cares about whether the buyer is paying more, whether the place is a real dump, whether they're getting some concessions from the seller. So they truly care about things like that. So I'm hearing out there that everybody's so worried about getting an agreement with a buyer and tying them up for a year. Oh my God, why do you need a buyer for a year? You don't. All my agreements are 30 days. You want to extend it for another 30? I have never, and I know this sounds like baloney, but it's not. I have never had a buyer leave me to go somewhere else because they just don't, because a true buyer agent really does things for the buyer. And somebody that has been educated and somebody that has gone out there and maybe had bad experiences, it's not a problem to get them to sign an agreement. You just make it easy on them. You don't ask for, 100 days. Or I shouldn't say 100 days, but 100 years.
Can I ask, so what are you planning to get for compensation? Still 2.5%, 3%, 2%? Do you have a strategy moving forward that you're going to ask for?
I haven't decided what. It kind of depends on the client. It kind of depends on the price of the property. It just depends. But all my offers are going to have my commission built right into it. I don't have to go to a listing agent and say, oh, by the way, can you pay me? Just like a FSBO. All these agents run to a FSBO and they get them to sign a one-day agreement. That's so old school. I mean, every buyer can put their commission into the contract paid by the seller. And they don't have to call it closing costs. They can if they want to, but they don't have to. So include it in the offer. I mean, it's simple. You want my offer, you want my buyer, here's the deal. It comes with my commission getting paid.
Yeah, I've had the same experience. I haven't looked at the verbiage in a while, but I had a broker that, he laid out the verbiage for us to use, and it's exactly what you're saying. The seller will pay closing costs that buyer can distribute as they see fit. Something to that effect, but exactly what you're saying. That it was not illegal.
Eve, I appreciate what you said, and I really, really, I love the fact that, you're a strong advocate for, I think, exactly what we're talking about, which is you're showing your value to your customers. And it's a very strong statement that you make, that you're putting a 30-day thing out there and making it very clear that here are the wonderful things I'm going to do for you during that period. And to say that you've never lost anybody, that's an amazing accomplishment. Good for you. And I appreciate you speaking as strongly as you have about this. A couple of people commented, well done, well said. And that's very true. I mean, if you're strong and you know your business, you're not afraid of this at all, because you know what you've been doing all along. And,
right.
We need to bring other people along. And this is exactly the kind of dialogue that we were looking for in terms of, folks that have done this, know their craft and understand it. So thanks a bunch for doing that.
You're welcome.
Hey, and Eve, if I could just add, when I said
Sure.
that a lot of the buyer's agents are newbies, I wasn't talking to people people like you that have already gotten agreements signed are the cream of the crop. You guys, and actually, I think you could benefit, because this probably will drive some of the people out that aren't real strong, that are working with buyers just because they think it's easier. So I think
there's going to be more awareness for buyer representation.
Well, sure.
And I also think there's too many unskilled, what they call themselves buyer agents, but it's really just an agent with a buyer. So,
Yeah.
I do think that those that know what they're doing can, you know, flourish under these situations. So when this came about, I didn't care, you know, if they pay me or they don't pay me, because, you know, I've been there.
That's awesome. Do you have a couple of just, and I'm going to ask you this, and I'm going to move on to a couple other things, and we're going to continue on, but a couple of things that you've done to build your pipeline of buyers that are available to you?
I do some Google marketing, and I have a pipeline. I can't say it's really huge or it's, you know, a money maker. And so I'm looking at this probate thing just to, you know, just to see what it is. I like to stay educated. I'm very educated, and I take classes all the time. So I like to be smarter than the average bear.
Great. Well, do this for me if you would. I appreciate you being on here, and if you'll drop your contact info in, I'd like to be able to reach out to you after this and pick your brain a little bit and talk to you about some things that we're looking into. And I appreciate your feedback. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Great. I know almost you have your hand up, and Arrington, you took your hand back down again. I'm happy to call on you if you want to raise your hand again. Right now, I'm going to call on Almas, is it? Yep, go ahead.
Okay, my question, I know if I have been in the business for more than 20 years, and strictly I have worked with a buyer's agent. I'm from Houston, Texas, and the Houston market, where when it comes to agents, I'm sure other cities are the same. It's highly saturated market, and people are all buyer's agents. I would call them so-called buyer's agent. Like Eve said, they are not buyer's agent, but there are agents who just do the transactions for the buyers. They're always competing with the commission. So it's just that I think our market would be highly affected by this because of the fact it would be a dual agency mostly, because people who have listings would be able to. Right now, it's the same thing. The client customers, if they have not signed it, they say, hey, can you show me this property because my agent is busy? And I know what they're saying. They're saying, okay, if we like the home, we'll go directly to the listing agent to save on the commission. So it will get affected. And moreover, when we say we roll our commission into the price, now the second question, which is directly linked to this one, is when we roll what the seller is willing to pay us into the offer, would the property appraise for that? How would the appraisal market affect the prices? Because right now, when we are doing the comps, we are already educating the buyers and the sellers that all the comps had 6% commission in them, and that was an easy pick. We assumed all the commissions were 6%, and now every property would be based on a different commission angle. So my point is, how are the comps going to get affected?
Hey, Bruce, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You broke up there just a second. Bruce, did you have, yeah, I knew you were going to say something. Were you going to reply?
Yeah, we don't know that the comps paid 6% commission. We don't know. We're blind to what those comparable sales sold for. We may in different markets be able to assume that maybe they paid 6%, but there's no guarantee. And we handle comps and potential appraisal issues the same way that we do in any hot market. And I realize not everybody's in a hot market, but the same way that we would in any hot market. My market is heated back up, and people are paying more than asking price, and people are covering out of pocket. Buyers are covering the gap in the appraisal and the sale price. So if you're in a relatively hot market, this is not going to change. It does mean that buyers are going to most likely need to be slightly more qualified and have slightly more reserves. It will, if there's no compensation being offered, and I think it's really, really important that we all know that this only affects that compensation won't be offered through the MLS. It does not mean that there will not be compensation offered. It's really important that everybody get that understanding. Sellers may still offer listing agents may still offer compensation. We don't know how that's going to be affected in each individual market yet. I'm saying that if buyer agent compensation goes away, then buyers agents are going to need to, or buyers are either going to need to be able to put it in the contract and ask for the seller to pay their agent's commission on their behalf or a closing cost on their behalf, or they're going to need to have a little bit of extra money to pay their agent as a closing cost. So I don't want to jump to any conclusions as to how that's going to shake out yet. The market will eventually bear out and show us what it's going to look like.
Great, great. Well, we don't have any more hands up right now. And Arrington, I'll say again, if there's something you wanted to ask or comment on, raise your hand and we'll get to you for sure. Bruce, you had said something that I think probably is a good jumping off point here. We've got some time left, and if we run a little long, we'll run a little long. This is probably, as Jim would say, this biggest attendance we've had in a long time. I'll actually overdo Jim. This is probably the biggest attendance we've had on this call. So I think it's important that we use our time as best we can. Narrington, I see your hand. I'm going to move to Bruce, and then we'll get back to you before we get off. Leave your hand
Yeah,
up.
we have a couple people that couldn't get in because our attendance capped out. We're going to have to raise our limit.
Oh,
Starting with the
that's at 100, huh?
Yeah, we told them to sign in through Facebook or YouTube, and I'm hoping they did.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I think that says why. I thought we had it limited and we didn't, and we'll fix that.
Yep.
Our apologies, and we'll certainly fix that. Bruce, you were going to talk about, why this is good for us, and I want to talk a little bit about why from the standpoint of certainly probate, pre-probate, and divorce, why, these transitional leads are vital to the market right now and why it's so important. So fire off there, bud.
Well, I'm just going to say that being an agent with the buyer, I really like that. Being an agent with a buyer is kind of the low barrier to entry into this space. Those of you that have real skill when it comes to converting listings, and if you don't have real skill, go get real skill. YouTube is an amazing resource. We have trainings here through Probate Mastery, different things like that can help you become a listing agent. If you don't have skill, go develop the skill. This is going to be getting listings like this with have to sell sellers is going to be where it's at. How you structure your deal with the sellers is up to you. It's up to you. It's up to your seller. It's up to your brokerage. I'm going to encourage you guys to continue to encourage them to pay enough to where you can compensate a buyer's agent. Okay. If they flat out won't, they buy into the media and they buy into the news. That's okay. It's okay, guys. It actually makes in some ways it makes it easier for you to get listings if you're a true listing expert. So the only thing I'm really going to refer to right now without specific questions is that all the fear that some people have, and I know we've got a lot of highly experienced folks here, some of the fear that you may have, I want you to put it out of your mind. The only time that you should be scared right now is if you are not willing to make adjustments. If you want to stick to the status quo, you should be scared. If you want to adjust to a changing market, you should be excited.
Well, and I think one of the things I would ask all of us to kind of comment on is why what we're offering and why what we're helping you learn how to best represent is vital in the marketplace today, and probably more so than it was this time last week. Developing expertise in a channel that's going to be an evergreen source of leads for you is vital to your business going forward. Anything that you can do to build your representation within this channel is great. Your representation to it is something that we're going to help you do in terms of, hopefully crafting your message maybe a little bit differently to the people that you talk to as to why you're the right person to deal with. And right now, I think that, Bruce, this is kind of really where I was going to come from with this. It seems like to me that with all of the noise that the media is helping us generate right now, with all the furor over this, it's a question, probably more and more, next week going to be more than it is this week, as this goes on and it finally becomes apparent that a huge change has occurred in the real estate industry, that, when you talk to people, you're going to have to be prepared to have that discussion. And, they're going to want to know where your position is on this. And you can rest assured, don't you think, that anybody who's talking to a personal representative or someone who's going through divorce, they're going to be talking about commissions. It's going to be a leading topic, certainly for weaker people. You made that point yourself, that, if I'm not necessarily real good at this, I may just resort to discounting, just to say, well, I'm going to do it for less than anybody else will. I think that's likely, don't you?
Yeah, I read a quote by Zig Ziglar, and I'm gonna totally butcher it. I'm gonna butcher it, but it was just this last week. I read a quote that people will listen to someone that they like. They'll buy from someone that they trust or they find credible. And if your only way of competing is to reduce your fee, okay, you're maybe likable, but you're not credible. If you're offering a real value and you know how to present your value in the probate space to divorce leads, to your sphere of influence, it doesn't matter. If you know how to present your value in a credible way, this isn't going to hurt you.
Right. I agree. I think this is the same conversation I've been having for 17 years, where someone says, hey, I don't want to pay closing costs. And I'm like, hey, I get it. I don't want to pay closing costs either. And I want free parking, and, I would like to go to the movies for free. But what are you going to net at the end of the day? What are you going to put in your pocket?
Yep.
If you could pay 10,000 and you could net an extra 25,000, would that sound like a reasonable scenario to you? So it's basically it's the same thing. Let's not. I think we need to take the conversation off of commission and put it back onto what are you going to net? How much money could I put in your pocket, in your bank account at the end of the sale? And control the dialogue and the narrative. Like you said, the media is pumping fear and trying to get people all excited like we're the bad guys. Like, I can help you net more money. Does that sound appealing?
And Ken, I was going to just add to what you said, what Bruce said is the misconception. You have somebody who has that misconception, you're not allowed to charge me 6% anymore. A great answer to that is, boy, this is a great opportunity for you to be at a competitive advantage versus the other listings. Somebody who's only paying 3% has their agent working for them. Would you rather have me work for you or 10,000 agents out there? Do you think having 10,000 agents working for you will make up that 3% commission by getting multiple offers? There's a good chance it will. So it's all it's not what you pay, it's what you net. Exactly.
100%. Just like when we talk about 2.5 to 3, I go, well, listen, Mr. Seller, at 2.5, your home is the average home to the buyer's agent. At 3%, they're like, wow, look how tall the ceilings are. Wow, look how beautiful this carpet is. Oh my God, like, do you see the windows? Like, how much light is coming in here? It's amazing. So
well, that's brilliant, Ken. That's brilliant, bud. That's really well said. That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really sort of the key, with all of this, that the reality is a lot of this is just going to come down to how you present yourself, what you do, and how proud you are of your capabilities. It's the same old thing, in the automobile business, the best salespeople are the ones who are able to appropriately do exactly what you said. I can show you the car, or I can show you this car, which is right for you, and here's why. And a lot of that is making sure that in terms of that discussion, you get to know your customers really, really well. You know what's going to motivate them. You get it done, and you can immediately and confidently assert that to a potential listing appointment and talk to them about how deeply, if you're looking at the other side of the equation, how deeply you get involved with the people that you're going to bring through their property and what you know about them in advance. And you got to dig into that interview.
And how fast you want to get the home sold.
Right.
Listen, you could offer 0% commission and your house, might sit for 9 months. Are you okay with that? Like, I'm fine.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to Eve's comment there that just keeps resonating with me. You're not a buyer's agent, you're an agent with buyers. Okay. I'm gonna go and put a challenge out to you guys as well on this call because the majority of our agents here, and I know some of you are investors, we're not trying to ignore you guys. This applies to you all as well. But those of you that are agents, I encourage you not to be an agent with a listing. Learn how to be a real listing agent. Okay. What is an agent with a listing? You put a sign in the yard, you put the property in the MLS, and you go home that it sells tomorrow and you make a commission. That's an agent with a listing. Learn, if you don't already know, learn how to offer real value that makes your seller's life easier and makes them more money and be able to demonstrate that. Don't be an agent with a listing, be a listing agent who can demonstrate their value. And I thank Eve because I never would have thought about that distinction if she hadn't said that about buyers, buyer agents. So
No, that truer words were never spoken. You got to be better at what you're doing now. And Bruce, you said one other thing, and I'll ask. I'm going to say something, and then it'll be challenging in this obvious group of the folks that we have here. But here's the reality: if you're an investor and you're looking at this, what might you say as an investor to a prospective person who is selling their property? Well, I would certainly be aware that they're going to be dealing with all the people who are coming and talking about discount commissions and all of that. I would simply jump right on that and say, hey, you got no commissions involved here. I can help you tomorrow. And clearly delineate the fact that, or differentiate the fact that, all the furor about that doesn't matter. I'm interested in buying your house today. You can let all the realtors in the world go through all the shenanigans that they're going to offer you and all that. And I think, that's what a smart investor as part of their pitch is going to be, not just on the price. I've got a great price for you, but how long is it going to take you to get it done the other way? And Eve made such a wonderful point there that she only does 30-day agreements with people. She's going to get them in it and get it done quick, and apparently is extremely good at what she does. And I think that's an incredible testament to her business to be able to do that.
by the way, I do the same thing on my listings and my buyers is a short agreement. I never want to lock someone into something if they're not a good fit for me and I don't do a good enough job to get them in a property or to get their home sold in a reasonable amount of time. I don't deserve to earn their business, or I have to re-earn their business each time. Which means I better do a really good job and not put myself in a position to have to re-earn their business. And consumers really like that. Anyone that's trying to lock their consumer up in a 6 or 12-month agreement, which I used to do, do you really think that you're providing value, or are you just trying to get someone locked up where they can't ever go anywhere else?
Well, them days is over.
Yeah, sort of. Those of you that do long agreements, that's fine. I understand, but just think about that. Who's it benefiting to lock someone into an agreement that lasts forever? You.
Yeah, just making yourself vulnerable to someone who's going to come along and say, well, I'm not going to ask you to the person who's going to do exactly what you said. I'm not going to ask you to do that. I want to earn it quickly and help you get it done. Is it important to you to sell your house quickly?
Mm-hmm.
You're just making yourself vulnerable. You're raising an issue that shouldn't be there. Do your job appropriately and it won't be there. So, yeah. All right, let me talk to you about what we're going to do. We're already at the top of the hour here, and I just want to kind of finish this up. And first off, thank you for all of you who attended, and hopefully you got a lot out of this. And by virtue of how many people we got in and that we hit the top of our ceiling along the way, we'll make sure that doesn't happen again. And we did a good job of clearing people out to get enough people on here. I don't think we had very many people that couldn't get in. We're going to take the comments that we heard back from you today, and we're going to take all this and we're going to kind of put some best practices together for helping you craft your message to get this done. I'll also tell you that we're going to continue to visit this issue from time to time and add some additional pieces to that. We'll make this kind of a living document, but more importantly, we're going to try to help you create an appropriate menu of services on both sides of this equation to make sure that when you are talking to prospective buyers or sellers either way, and whether you're an investor or an agent, that you have a great message that you're offering. and certainly to take even better advantage of the opportunities that we're putting in front of you with all of the leads that we're giving you. You've got to make sure your message is good, because the competition is at very least is going to get more difficult for you, because people are going to get desperate. Then that's kind of the last point I'm going to make. I don't think that anybody who is looking at this as a talking head in the media or a writer is not saying the same thing about this, and that is, this is going to lead to a lot of people exiting our industry. The ones that were simply existing on the fringes and occasionally getting a tidbit because they lucked into a good buyer, or they listed their brother-in-law's house and made a commission along the way. That competition is going to get harder and harder and harder. And we want to make sure that whatever we can do to help you avoid that trap and avoid the fact that there's going to be more noise out there than ever before, you've got to confidently state what you do for a living and the value that you're offering. So we're going to help compile all that, get you the best info we can, and give you some best practices. And as you hear things in your marketplace, when it comes back to you, please talk to us about that as well, and let us know what you're hearing. Share with everybody else along the way. And I see we've got a couple hands up. I will get to you. I'm going to close our piece of this by saying that, and I think that's kind of important. But Alyssa, did you have something that you wanted to kick in there? Go ahead.
Yeah, just before we close out, we can take Justin's question first and then just come to me before we end.
Okay, Justin, go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you.
Hey, how y'all doing? This is my first time in here. My mentor, Paige Morby, told me to come check you guys out. I had a question though. It's off topic what you guys are talking about. I found the property that was delinquent in taxes, and it's a probate, and I was wondering, do you know of a good way to skip trace them?
Skip trace.
For like the heirs.
Well, so you have the property, it's in probate. You already know that it's in probate?
No, it's not in probate. It's right now behind the taxes. It's delinquent in taxes. So eventually, I was just trying to reach out to see if I could find, a decision maker.
I see. Well, why don't you hop on, and we could probably help you do that, and kind of talk to you a little bit more about some of the things that we do. And I know Pace sent you here. He probably recommended you to talk with us. Why don't you go to our website, hop on, and just fill a little form out there, and we'll get back to you and talk with you.
Okay.
And we'll see if we can help you solve your problems. Okay.
Okay. Cool.
All right, bud. Thank you. Alyssa, if you're still unmuted, go ahead.
Yes, I just really quickly wanted to just take a minute to just mention, I know we have a lot of new people on the call today and people that don't always tune in every week. So I just did want to remind you that we do have this call every single Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. So normally our calls are more focused around probate, pre-probate, divorce, the types of leads that we offer. But from time to time, we do have different discussions with specific topics and stuff like this. But since we had a lot of new people, I did just want to mention really quick, if probate is something you're interested in, or if you're not totally familiar with all the leads and what we do, I encourage you to take a minute to just hop over to our website and look around. We did just launch our brand new CRM. We did just launch our relationship with Appointments Today, which is our ISA and virtual assistant calling service for people who are having trouble getting all of their calls done and making sure that you're following up with your leads efficiently. So just wanted to put a little shameless plug in there, since we do have a big audience that we're not used to seeing. So if you're new, go to alltheleads.com/checkmycounty. You can get information about leads that are available in your county. We do offer the training, the marketing, the CRM, all the stuff that you need to be successful in this niche. So that's my PSA about who we are for today.
Always good to help pay the bills. And of course, we are here to make money as well. And, we do sell things, but I think also we try to be true to our own thing, which is, we offer value and we give a lot of it away. And that's certainly what this call today was about. And I appreciate Alyssa saying that, because, oftentimes I get pretty passionate about some of the things that we're talking about and, forget to pay the bills. But you know, we're here for you guys, and that's really what this is all about from our standpoint. I appreciate everybody that participated today and all of that. And Jimmy, I'm going to kick it back to you to take us in.
All right. Well, I'm going to finish by saying, obviously, this call was not about divorce leads as previously advertised. we did a midweek pivot, and we felt like this would be a much more timely and important topic. And I'm assuming we'll let you know, but I'm assuming we will probably go back to that next week or the following week. I did want to really thank everybody who was here. One of our best audiences ever. Want to particularly thank those that actively participated. We had some really, really good input. And don't forget, one thing that we said several times is change always creates opportunity. So we want you guys to get out ahead of that opportunity. And I want to challenge each of you, just take one thing, one idea that inspired you on this call, go out and put it into practice, and please come back next Thursday and share the results with the group. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank y'all.